and we're down here every Saturday morning at 26 East Pearson. We're here 9 to 10 every Saturday morning, and you can get us on youtube.com/Heartland Media. You can watch a lot of great stuff. That was Through We Rasta by Funkadesi, some of our favorites, been on the show recently, and now we are honored to bring on David Kelly of the Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation. Good morning to you, brother.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good. We're glad to have you.
Good to be here.
What is a Ministry of Reconciliation?
So it's a restorative justice organization on the south side of Chicago. For most of my adult life, I've been working in jails and detention centers as a chaplain, and have lived and worked in parishes in the south side of Chicago, And we work at Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation and with a restorative justice lens to create spaces and places for people who have been victims of violence and people who have perhaps caused violence. And together we try to focus on healing rather than on punishment.
So you talked about being a chaplain in prisons. Is that the journey that led you to this particular work, or was there something else that drove you to tackle this problem this way?
In the late 70s, I was between college and grad school in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I entered in for my first time into what was called the Cincinnati Workhouse, which was a correctional facility built for Civil War prisoners. And in that space and place, I found, I suppose you could say, my vocation. And if I could live the way I was living with this particular parish, St. Mark's Parish, an African American parish, which was very open and very spiritual, and if I could do this kind of work, then I thought perhaps I could be a priest. And so that led me to Chicago in the late 70s to go to Catholic Theological Union, where I started to work in Cook County Juvenile Detention Center. That was my field ed placement, and I'm still there today.
Wow. So are there particular neighborhoods that the people you work with come from?
Well, we're primarily in the back of the yards in Inglewood community on the south side of Chicago, so 51st and Elizabeth, and that's a space and place where most of our people come from. But because I'm in the jails and juvenile detention center and sometimes in prisons, we meet people from other places. And because of that, we have really started a collaborative called a Community Restorative Justice Hubs, in which we work with other organizations such as ourselves, and together we formed a collaborative. We have the pillars, if you will, values that we embrace, radical hospitality, accompaniment, those kinds of things, so that no matter where a young person or a family person might come from, he or she might find in his or her own community a place where they could go.
You know, two of the hosts here on the show used to have a restaurant, and when you use the term radical hospitality, that strikes a little chord, but I'm not sure why. What is radical hospitality in your work?
First of all, it's exhausting. It's not... It's
like a restaurant.
That sounds...
Well, it is creating spaces and places for young people who have been traumatized and who oftentimes live out of that trauma, who are hurt and angry,
for the rest
and
of their
making
lives.
sure that they feel that this place is for them, that they're welcome, and not put out because of their attitude or the way they carry themselves or how they look or what they affiliate themselves with, that this space is for them. And my belief is that if someone feels like they belong, they become co-creators. However, that takes a lot of energy and a lot of focus and a lot of good people who are willing to really welcome them into those kinds of spaces.
What kind of space, literally physical space, do you work out of?
We're on the second floor of an old school, old Catholic school.
Which parish?
It was the St. John of God parish.
Ah, St. John by God. We used to call it St. John by God.
So the church is down. The only thing that's still there is the old school building, and we're on the second floor of the school building, and there's an alternative high school on the first floor.
What an excellent use for it.
Yes.
Can you give us an example of what some people are going to go, oh, reconciliation, that's a little touchy-feely for our hard-edged urban problems.
Yeah, I get that
Give
sometimes.
me an example of...
We like touchy-feely.
You know, an actual example of where this practice came into play and how it played out.
So it's not new. So first of all, it comes from indigenous teachings that as human beings we're spiritual, physical, emotional, and mental people. And if you utilize the full person, you're better apt to come with a positive result, versus just some sort of mental, let's look at the law, let's look at who broke the law, and let's look at how we're going to punish that person. So restorative justice, which is the philosophy that we embrace that allows us to live out reconciliation, restorative justice is something in which you start to focus not on punishment, but on healing. And who was harmed, who was impacted by the violence, and what they need to feel as though people, first of all, care, and that they experience some sort of healing. And so with some repair of harm. So, young person burglarizes a home. We have a relationship with the court sometimes, and some of those cases are sent to us, and we would outreach to both the person who did the harm, this is in one particular case a young person, and the person whose home was burglarized. And rather than just look at the burglary, we bring people together, community. So we form community, literally in a circle. Peacemaking circle is the practice of restorative justice. And in that space, that's values-based, and we use storytelling and ritual and symbols to create safety, as we would in other places. Like if someone came into your home, you do certain things, there are certain rituals to make them feel welcome.
Oh, would you like a cup of coffee now?
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that'd be all right. And then in those spaces, when we start to really focus on relationships, and first, building strong relationships, then you can get at whatever the issue might be. So it's oftentimes, I see this all the time, when we come into a space, people are a little bit removed, but once we begin to talk about who we are and what's important to us, and people start to see each other not as others, but as very much akin to me. And that your situation is not all that different than my situation, even when there are various differences like ages and ethnicities and et cetera, et cetera. And in that space, where we're not so separate, but I don't look at you as an other, that I see you as, oh, you're a young person who's also experienced violence, you've also experienced disappointment, you also been expelled from school, then I can get at whatever the issue might be is not so impassable.
And how does this, how many times a week or a month are you creating these circles? How many people are you bringing together this way?
So we do a host of different circles. So circles can be a victim offender circle, as I just kind of explained, or it can be moms who have all experienced the death of a loved one, a child, due to homicide. So they sit in circles on Saturdays, and they gather with other mothers who have lost children to homicide. And then in that spaces, they find support and healing, and oftentimes they find some purpose, what we can do together. Last weekend we had a Mother's Day March in which mothers gathered together. These are mothers who've lost children to homicide, and walking right alongside with mothers who've lost children to incarceration. And there were 300 or so people, and we walked around our neighborhood and we said there's a different way we can live together. We do not have to look at each other as though you're wrong and I'm right. But we are mothers who have experienced loss in our lives. Go ahead.
So many people are aware of and trying to work on these issues right now. Are you in coalition, say, with anybody like Andrew Holmes or the mothers on the block, the moms who have made it a point of sitting on the block all summer long and all that sort, how do you...
That's precisely who was gathering at this march on
Yeah.
Saturday. It was Mothers Against Senseless Killing, Mothers for Peace, my block, my city, my hood, my block, my city,
Right.
that kind of thing. So these are folks that have an interest in finding a solution rather than just pointing to a problem. So these are folks who come together and say, this is our community, how do we respond to what's happening within our community?
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to agree to reconciliation. And I suspect you have stories where you tried and people just wouldn't come together, or there were other things that got in the way. Based on what you've learned with this work, how else might we attack stemming the tide of violence as we hear about coming into a holiday weekend if reconciliation isn't going to be the immediate tool that can be used?
A lot of times it's not the immediate tool because it's never an alternative offered. So if I am a victim of violence, the only alternative I have is jail or nothing. And so, of course, I'm going to pick jail if the other option is nothing. But if I have the option of saying incarceration, or let's really bring this person in, let's intervene, let's talk about what he did and how that person can be held accountable, then I might say this is a better option because it has better outcomes for me, for my community, and certainly for that young person. And a lot of people think that restorative justice is soft on crime, or fuzzy and kumbaya and all the other things I hear oftentimes. But it really is about accountability. But holding someone accountable is not just punishing them, because that's not accountability. Holding someone accountable means that we're still in a relationship. And that's the difference. That's what happens in a circle, that we build relationships with one another. And then as you would with your child, you want that child to learn from his or her mistakes. and you want that child to be held accountable, but you do not want that child to be considered a menace or a thug or a thief or just a throwaway child in the world today.
What are
Like
some
like
historical
Heartland.
antecedents for reconciliation in your kind of work? What inspiration have you drawn from other people, other places?
So, I have been a victim. I have lost a godson to homicide. I have lost a lot of people that I care dearly about to violence. But I've also have a lot of young people and family members who I love dearly who have been perpetrators of violence. And when I sit in those kinds of spaces, it's a little bit more difficult for me to just say, you're evil, therefore we need to discard the world of you. I know there's a better route. And I've been in certain situations when I've known both sides very well. And I've gone to court, and no one attended to the victim at all. It was all a theater about how we're going to punish this person for the crime he committed. And when we walked away from that trial, the young man got 27 years, and myself and the person who was shot twice and his mother walked back to my office there to their apartment. And during those 2.5 years of that whole process, no one ever asked the kid who was shot, is there anything we can do for you? Is there anything you need? Or no one ever approached the mother and says, how can we help? All the attention, all the focus, all the resources was on what crime was committed, who did it, and let's really punish this person so that he doesn't do it again, and certainly so that others, so it's a deterrent to others.
Yeah, likely.
And so that's what really allows me or helps me or pushes me to do this kind of work, because I see the results.
You heard the previous interview, and we could clearly spend a lot more time with you on your body of work, but what gives you hope in all that you've seen and continue to see? What gives you hope about...
Young people who come together and are willing to look beyond just their own pain and really engage other people. And I think that if I'm part of a community restorative justice collaborative, 7 organizations such as ourselves that band together with a common database, a training academy. We get together regularly as executive directors. I think that's a game changer, because all of a sudden the community has a voice. So it's not just systems and policy people making the decisions, it's community saying, no, this is what we need, and this is what we need from you for the support of this particular program. Too often, systems have come with money and said, this is what we want you to do. And in our situation, it's the community that needs to say, no, we know what's best for our community, and this is what we need from you. And as a politician or whomever it might be, that's what we need to do to hold our politicians and our leaders accountable to the community.
David Kelly, Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, thank you so much for joining us this
We've
morning.
got to stay in touch with you,
And
David.
we will stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.
You're a great resource and phenomenal work. Good luck.
Yeah.
I wish there were thousands that you were working with, but I understand the step at a time, and it's really, really important work.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. We want to thank Flint Taylor and David Kelly for being our guests today. For our music producer Lynn Orman, who's been taking a few weeks off, our engineer James Porter, and our wonderful new videographer over the summer, Joe Gay Tillman. And we want you all to do good in the world, because the world needs all the good
that we do.
All
Power to the people.